Welcome back to the League Community Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a fun one for you folks today. I, of course, am Dylan Most Dirty. With me today is the DNA team, called that way because of design, narrative, and art. Inspiration behind the new Taric update. So with me, we have George Christic representing the art. George, please introduce yourself.
Hey, I actually represent the,
did I say art?
Narrative, so that's fine.
I'm terrible.
It's all in art, right?
I swear I knew that.
Everything we do here is in art.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's all
They
inclusive.
know I know that. They just know I'm an idiot.
No.
Oh, man.
Also,
Okay.
the word art is in narrative somewhere, so you're
Good
not wrong.
point. Thank you, Josh. I always knew I liked you. Okay, so Josh, you, of course, represent...
The art.
Yeah. Your job, of course, is a little more challenging because, as I've always mentioned, there are a lot of artists in pods, whereas with the other two disciplines, it's a little more centralized. Right. Although, of course, many people touch it. But you are kind of speaking to an extent for your fellow technical artists and animators and such.
Yeah, I can relay sort of the mindset of the whole Taric art pod.
Cool.
I specifically worked on kind of the concept art stuff and the splash art stuff.
Perfect.
For Taric.
And of course, Riot Repertoire representing the gameplay for the Taric update.
Guess I don't have a real name, huh?
Man,
This is why you don't
you
drink
guys are
before
calling
a
me. I'm doing
podcast.
terribly right now.
No,
I was
like
just
it.
thinking, talking to Josh, I was like, I didn't get his summoner name. Damn. Okay. So yes,
You nailed it.
David Capurro, of course, is
Yeah.
Riot Repertoire.
That's me.
George and Josh, what are your guys' summoner names?
Glorfed.
Glorfed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's that? Besides the sound that Zach makes.
It's a long story, but it's my gamer tag for like ever. So
Okay,
I've
gotcha.
carried it since I was a kid.
Well, there you go.
Just the first thing you mashed
Yeah,
into the
pretty
keyboard
much,
when you were a
yeah.
kid.
Josh, I knew yours at some point, but I've forgotten. What
Huge
is
and
it?
fast.
Huge and fast.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent.
Is that something you typed in when
you
you
want
were
to
a
tell us
kid?
what that's all about?
I was a kid, yes.
Well, this has been an excellent round of introductions. I, of course, am doing a great job. But no, really appreciate you guys coming out here today. So Taric, obviously the hot item in the news. And with this podcast, we're hoping you take a little bit of an inside design look, get to know what it was like working on Taric, where you guys started, where we are now, all that fun stuff. So let's get started. So Taric, okay, he's I don't think he's quite a founding character, but he's certainly been around a pretty long time. He's not original 40, is he?
He might
don't
be.
know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He's like
shrouded
if not, he's like
days of old.
41.
I think he's
Yeah.
original 40, but not one of the original beta characters.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
that
So
makes
certainly, his art certainly has that look to it. That
Yeah.
original 40 look.
Yeah, here's a
AKA
picture
Pizza
of
Feet.
what he looks like in game. You know?
Okay, so he's been around since then, and Taric is certainly iconic. Obviously, is going to bring a couple memes to mind immediately. Whenever players sing about him, mostly centered around variations on outrageous and X
Stage.
stone is for Y emotion, that type of thing.
Yep.
And why wasn't that enough, I guess, is what we're coming to. Like, I'm really kind of curious. I think the answers are pretty obvious, but let's dive into that. You know, when they said to you, all right, George, Joss, and David, you're going to update Taric. What was it like that day? What was your kind of on the spot analysis? So, like, George, why don't we start with you on the story front? What was your immediate take? What was okay? What did you want to make better?
Of course. Well, I think, with any update, what we always look at is we try to, and this is kind of our internal philosophy, is, do no harm and also make things better. So we look at a character and we go, what are the elemental truths of this character? What are the things that players have connected to? And then we want to preserve those, and then we want to expand upon them. So, with Taric, we know that the people connected to, his gems, the fact that he has a certain amount of, magical ability, and then certain aspects, excuse me, of a little bit of cheekiness, some humor, some connection. He's not just like axe bro who's gonna axe you. So we kind of wanted to explore that, and the DNA pod and Champ update as a whole, as well as narrative, wanted to say like, what if we start asking a lot of what if questions? What if we told the second chapter of his life? What if we kept Taric intact but said down the road, if he was faced with a challenge, what he would do, or, if his world got turned around. So those were the kind of conversations, and the way we build our champs, and this is something that all aspects of champ does is we boil things down to three key pillars, and then once we solidify those pillars, we move forward.
Gotcha. What were those in this case?
So it was a charming outsider. There was a gem magic.
Crystallized starlight.
There you go.
All
There
right.
you go.
Which is the
Fancy sounding.
the semantics to make gem magic sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, I said the wrong thing. But again, we wanted to be true to what players were,
For sure.
attracted to.
That's what-
Like we
yeah.
didn't want to ignore that. Yeah.
And then the third thing was, did I miss one?
I think it was Battle Cleric.
It was Battle
Gotcha.
Cleric.
Oh,
Kind
yes,
of refers
yes,
to
yes.
his his archetype.
Sure,
gameplay
awesome.
style.
And so we'll be getting back to, of course, kind of where Taric has ended up. But part of what you mentioned, it definitely makes me think back to some of the updates of old. Like Champion Update itself has had a pretty long and kind of complicated history, and I think one of the whole doing the chapter 2, kind of like what is the next stage for this character has been one of those evolutions, I believe, to some of those cases in the past where you've run into just replacing a character almost wholesale into like a new, completely different version of them that even if it got rid of like some of the elements that seemed a little more minuscule, like again, those were maybe the things that the players identified with.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't want to, repeat any mistakes that we may have done in the past. And we do a lot of research. We reach out to players. We do player labs, and we really listen. So that was the process by which we went about, updating from a narrative standpoint, as well as from a visual standpoint. So we did our due diligence. We didn't suddenly make, Jedis fly through space and have lasers coming out of their eyes.
I'm glad we did. Can't mess around with Taric, man. People love Taric.
Yeah.
Got to do him
Absolutely,
right. So
absolutely.
Josh, on that art front, what was your initial assessment? I can kind of guess that it was maybe a little critical of what we were dealing with, but can you elaborate at all?
You want me to talk about how bad it was?
I mean, we don't need to belabor the point. Yeah, we
Sure.
know all about pizza feed and dang the number of polygons and stuff like that.
It was a different
and,
time back then.
Yeah,
It was, yeah.
Hey, we were all fans back then. We all played the same game. We all loved it back then. And it's like, hey, the tech itself has advanced a lot at this point. We're talking
Absolutely.
like 6 years of like developing like art refinement, our sense of style here and everything like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the point is less like, oh God, Taric was, like awful looking and everything, but just more like what was kind of your initial assessment about like what we really kind of like, what was good there, what were maybe the new things you wanted to explore, that kind of thing.
Well, first of all, I think each day that passed, Taric more and more kind of stood out like a sore thumb in terms of like the quality,
Sure.
the visual quality. Every time we release a new champion, the bar incrementally sort of is raised a little bit,
Yeah.
which means the people at the bottom are, more at the bottom. And I'm speaking mostly just like about the visual quality of the in-game stuff. I think with Taric, in some ways, it was nice because, and this is not just about the art, but all aspects of him. I think players are like pretty crystal clear, pun intended, about the things that they like about Taric. You know what I mean? Like some characters, like we have to kind of dig to actually find something that people like about them. And these are kind of probably the ones that we've updated already, hopefully, right? But the nice thing about Taric was there's like a few key things that like unanimously everyone was like, yes, we need to keep these. And from a visual standpoint, these were sort of some kind of gems, some kind of crystals, right? Having his power source based in gem magic or crystallized starlight, as we ended up calling it. Flowing hair, shampoo commercial sort of hair, and just dashing good looks, and sort of that kind of Fabio masculine, chiseled, handsomeness.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Not the shield though, it seems.
Not the shield. We actually thought at the beginning of the process that the shield was more important than it ended up being.
Well, he's the shield now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh baby, look at that chest. That pretty much that works.
Yeah, it's more of like a metaphor now. But but there were many iterations of the shield, like a literal shield. It's a kind of an interesting story though, because it was a disconnect from, I think, where the gameplay was headed in terms of like how he plays and like when the shield actually comes in. What we ended up doing with like his in-game visuals was very informed by his gameplay, which was kind of is kind of further along in the process than everything else when I got onto the team. And we realized that with the shield, we were trying to like put a square peg in a round hole type of deal, because there wasn't like any cool moments for him to, like Brahms like shield is amazing because you actually get to block shit. And
we've raised the bar on shields these days. Like it's not enough to just be vaguely defensive and carry one around. Yeah.
So just because he's sort of tanky, that's not enough to legitimize him actually carrying a shield if he doesn't get to use it, right? And we had like a couple ideas about like, oh, what if it's like a constellation like magical shield that kind of unfolds like out of his tattoo, and it's like something that can turn on and off, so we can find like moments for him to use it. But it still kind of felt like we were trying to cram something in that wasn't necessary. And we ended up focusing more on the important stuff in our minds, which was like the crystals themselves and just sort of his like his general sort of tankiness.
Sure.
As a battle cleric.
Yeah. So you touched on something interesting, which is that each update is a highly unique process. Again, we've had a lot of learning, opportunities to learn how to do these things, and I think one thing that's come across is every character needs a unique touch. And in Taric's case, it seems like he's kind of been floating around for a while in the minds of the team. Kind of on the one hand, because as you mentioned, he did start to stick out more and more over time. But then also, I think there was just a really strong feeling of wanting to get him right that ended up transitioning into like, we're going to do full bore on this. We're going to touch all of the things here. This isn't going to be like just a gameplay or just a visual or anything like that. And also saw a cool opportunity to tie him into some current events going on with all the Targon stuff. But you also mentioned that doesn't necessarily mean that the components will all kind of be in step, and that I think in this case the gameplay was moving along a little early. So let's dive into that. How did you get involved, David, and kind of what was your initial take on what you wanted to do with Taric's kit?
Sure. As pretty much everybody knows, Taric needs some work, and there's a long list of champions that do need work, but we eventually have to choose, which ones are getting the love, and I happened to be at a cycle when it was like, all right, choose a champion, and so Taric became mine. It was cool. Taric was the first champion I actually ever loaded into and played before. I wasn't really a Taric main, but I was like, oh, cool, healer, tanky guy. This guy's probably really sweet. I guess I didn't know any better then because I did think he was kind of cool. But
hey, once upon a time, I get it. I was there. I played a ton of Taric back in the day.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. We were both fooled then. And so it came to doing his gameplay, and I didn't really know what to do at first. And thankfully, I had a lot of time. There wasn't really a lot of expectation that get it out quick and get it done, because the team is always working on so many updates at one time. Mm-hmm. Just because I finish the kit doesn't mean we plop them into an artist lap and they start working, And so in this case, I started working, and at first I was kind of a little timid. I was actually quite a bit more junior than I was now. It was one of my first projects, and I was like, oh, I got to respect this and that and all these things he's doing. I didn't really have a good concept for what to like keep and what needed to go and like what was important. So I tried a bunch of different things, and eventually I was talking with Mark Yatter, Scruffy, and,
sure.
and he was like, all right, this is, the stuff we're doing is good, but it's like, it's not enough. Let's think bigger. Let's start from the ground up and see what we do. I kind of like, that's probably pretty good advice. I didn't like that advice very much, because I was like, well, I don't think there's actually anything inherently wrong with what Taric is doing insofar as like what the outputs are.
Mm-hmm.
He is stunning people, he's healing people. It's like those things are okay things. Like those aren't necessarily boring things, and I think those are things that people will like do attach to, right? It's like pretty like standard like paladin-y type things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, well those aren't really must not be the problem. The problem is probably the way he's doing it is just so boring, so invisible. There's got to be a better way, right?
Gotcha.
And
so you liked the idea of what he's doing. They felt appropriate to his character, but the specific functionality was holding you back as you were trying to tweak them.
It was like how he's doing it.
Yeah.
Is kind of what's holding him back, right? It's like the way he sort of presented himself as this defensive, like frontline Healy guy was. I have a lot of stats, and my allies have a lot of stats, and I make them strong, but you can't really tell. Unless you really know the ins and outs, right? Because people will be like, but Taric's so strong. He's like, he gives your team so much armor, right? And it's like, that is actually the least interesting way to like feel cool
Sure.
in a game, right? It's like sneaky. It's like you hid something from your opponent to win is kind of like the best that gets, right? And so with this update, we really wanted to take the idea of like, okay, Taric is about auras, Taric is about healing, he's about defensive nature, he's got a sweet stun, and he gets in there and beats people up every now and again. So just took those kind of basic principles of like what he's doing, and then tried to translate them into like a cool new cohesive kit that plays much differently than any other.
That's cool to hear. I've Taric has obviously gone through some gameplay changes over time. I remember back way early in the day, he had some like, this is years and years, he had some like toggleable, Radiance is old, was like some type of toggleable, grant a ton of AD
it was
to things
toggle
around
to
you.
drain your mana, heal over time, like a small amount, and I think give armor or give AP and AD.
And my thing there is always like, this isn't Sono where like, I know I'm kind of doing a ton of aura stuff and everybody else knows that. When I was playing as Taric, I remember I'd have these strong feelings of like, man, look at all this armor I'm giving people. But wait, they probably don't notice that as much as I do. Now I feel bad about myself. They don't recognize me in the things I'm providing, you know? And so it sounds like you're not the only goal here, but figuring out ways where you can kind of express your skill more than just being like, hey, I've bought items, you get armor from me.
Yeah, a way to express your skill it was really important on Taric, and also just like a way for everybody else in the game to sort of interact with the things you're doing. And this doesn't need to be like super elaborate, like there's like different rules to the game, right? But it's like when I'm laning with Taric, or when I go to gank for Taric's lane, like what is different about doing that? And when I'm playing against him, what is different about doing it, right? And like he was super lacking in that department too. It's like, well, when someone comes near me, Taric's also going to come near me and put his E on me, and it's going to work every time, right? And it's like, okay, that's just not very interesting, right? So it's no wonder that like he just wasn't very popular, right? Because he wasn't doing anything like thrilling. You have a very flat experience on him, and it's okay to have like a low pace experience. Like you don't need to be like 500 APM or whatever to play League of Legends. You shouldn't have to. But I think you are entitled to like really really cool high moments, whether that they're coming from your champion or the game systems or the items or your teammates or whatever, right? But Taric the champion was really under delivering on those.
Gotcha. So it sounds like that kind of mode of thinking is what set you free to come up, with what we're currently getting in the update, and we'll get back to that. So I know that in the course of any champion creation process, including significant updates like this, a lot can change over time. And you talked a little bit about on the gameplay front, David, that you originally were maybe being a little too close to like what came before and trying to stay pretty close to that, and then moving out of that kind of freed you up. I'm curious, George and Josh, on the art and narrative fronts, were there any kind of developments over times, like through the art of work or through working on Taric, you kind of discovered where you wanted things to go over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for both of us, and I'll speak to being on the outside of art. Sure. Being presented with art, that I saw a lot of different iterations and a lot of different takes.
Yeah.
And it kind of helped fuel what I was doing and what my team, were doing. That it's like, okay, hey, let's look at Taric if he stayed in Demacia. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at Taric if he's out in the wild. That was an interesting take.
Yeah.
And then let's look at Taric if he, gets touched by the hand of Targon. So
I'd say things like the Targon stuff affects us both equally, right? Or
Mhm.
like both
Yeah.
disciplines, because that is like a really sort of core part of a character that can drastically change the way he looks and also the way he is and the way he acts, right? And in terms of the art, like basically I have like a really similar story as David, which is that
That was quite the giggle. This
Yeah.
better be good.
No, it's not funny. There was a period where we were just kind of like being a little bit too safe, I think.
Okay.
And we were just kind of respecting, I don't even know if respecting is the right word, but we were creating boundaries for ourselves
Sure.
based on like what he looked like before, right? And sort of deciding in a vacuum almost like what players like about like his visuals specifically, which is like the shield stuff I was talking about. We're like, well, he's got to have the shield because people are expecting the shield, and
Sure.
it's like, but I think we have to have priorities, you know, like old Taric had crystals everywhere. New Taric, ratio wise, has a lot less crystals, but they're more important and they're more impactful, right?
Gotcha.
And we did them in a way that sort of like works with the gameplay and works with the story, and serves like, you know, serves his personality, just in terms of like the Targon stuff, when you look at like crystallized starlight and whatever.
That's that fine balance, though, of, you know, again, we've had the Trundle in the past where it was just like, you deleted my champion and you've given me something else, and the lessons we can take from that are obviously, those can be taken too far themselves, which is to stay too, again, you know, not respectful, because we always want to be respectful of what came before. That's how we arrive at the right solution. But yeah, just setting those false boundaries for yourself and really asking, like, are these things that people actually care about? Because obviously we're updating them for some reason. Like, we think they can be better. We believe they can be better with, you know, 6 years of learning behind us. And how do we balance making, this is one way I always thought about it when I used to work with you guys a little more, was just how do we balance exciting the player who's played only Taric for, you know, 6 years, you know, keeping those key things that he needs to still enjoy it, but also knowing that make the best Taric we can for the player who hasn't started playing League of Legends yet.
Right,
you know,
right.
There's an ideal Taric there.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to like sort of consider there, and this, I don't think this is gameplay specific, but it's definitely part of choosing what gameplay stays and goes, and that is like what are they, like, what gameplay are they actually attaching to? Like, can we keep that, right? It's like the Taric's kit, and I can, you know, since I'm the designer, I can mostly only speak to the gameplay on this way. It's like if the thing they're attached to is like everything I do is reliable and is like of a set level of output, and, you know, low variance and like low counterplay and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you know, if you're attached to the things in the kit that are causing those things, that's where we have to start making the compromise, right? But it's when the things that they're attaching to that aren't actually offensive to like our values, then those are the ones that I think we're getting better at over time.
Okay.
Of being like, hey, does this have to go?
Right.
Then let's figure out how to keep it. And I think that part is also, we're doing more of that now in the narrative and the art side as well. And I think we're getting better on the gameplay side too. But it's you know, it's not easy sometimes, because it's like, you look at Taric and like part of the hardest part on him is just actually looking at him and being like, we know it's not right, but it's really not, like, a lot of things about it are not that offensive either, but still need to like work together or be changed or gone entirely, right? Like the shield was not offensive. But with all the other changes we made to the kit that you know, that happened over the course of time, it didn't really make sense anymore, and it wasn't, you know, really core to the character. But we don't think that like players are going to be like, oh god, I played Taric for that shield, right?
Right.
If they did, it's like, again, it's like he wasn't even doing anything with it, you know. So we try to respect like what they're wanting there, but not like exactly what they're.
I think the important thing that you mentioned is like the core of the character, right? Because I think there's a big difference between like the surface level stuff of like who a character is and what he looks like versus like the core of like what players think that he is, right? And with Taric, you know, just because we've been talking about the shield, I think the shield is a surface level thing. It's like, Taric has a shield, so new Taric should have a shield. If you dig down to the core of like who he is and like what is important about him as a League of Legends champion, the shield is part of his, you know, costume almost. It's not really something that people are attaching to, right? It's not special. A lot of people have shields. And I think from all disciplines, like ultimately in Champion Update, that's what we try to do, is we try to dig and like find like, it's not even like additive. It's like, let's go inside the character, find out like what makes this person tick, like what do people actually find compelling about them, and then open that out and like bring that to people and like actually deliver on what's in their imagination, right? That's kind of the way that I think we've been approaching things these days.
Another example of this on Taric specifically is that you know, he's like memed like just all over the place. Whenever he's mentioned, it's probably in some kind of meme. It's a fifth age thing, or it's a what type of gem thing or whatever, and that is one of the things that we wanted to like strike a balance there, right? It's like, oh, Taric, what are the players like liking there, right? And it's like at the end of the day, we chose like our interpretation of like what they're actually liking about that, because there is something that they're grasping onto there, is not like that Taric is a joke, right? Taric kind of is a joke on live because that's all there is to him. But we took that sort of like thinking of like, okay, what does all this really like mean for what the character actually is trying to be or could be, and we turned that into more, Taric is charming and he's fun, he's a good ally to have, and that type of thing, as opposed to like, oh, Taric should be a joke, right? And we should make him real fun, like good to laugh at, right? And so this is just another one of those things where if players were that was really what they wanted, like out of Taric, we want to give them a funny character, not like the laughing stock type,
I totally get you. I mean, and honestly, guys, I'll be honest. I was a little on edge coming in here. I'm an old Taric player, and I very jealously like guard what I love playing about him. I didn't know that, my armor, the 5th age Taric skin, and all of that stuff. And I've drunk the Kool-Aid, I'll tell you. No, and I think you guys have a really good point there about just in general, like identifying the things that can go and in the name of a greater good, and the things that must stay. With the shield, when you think about what Braum makes a shield, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, if the gameplay isn't there to support a shield, like, don't waste the space. Make the other things more awesome and kind of more emphatic in that way. And in terms of what you mentioned, David, who he is and the experience of playing him, you're right. I don't have a great feeling of like, I am Taric, I am so awesome, when playing him currently. This, the way that like with Azir, with newer champions we have, where like, he spawned a whole thing centered around yelling Emperor all the time, because when you play him, that's what you want to do. Like, you feel so awesome, and you feel like you are that character. And you're right, I feel like there is kind of a unique thing there that hopefully we're kind of getting across with Taric. I mean, even seeing some of the initial reaction, I remember when the splash first dropped, you saw people reacting to it, and it almost seemed like purely the fact that he was just beautiful was almost enough. Like that immediately people were just like, yep, it's Taric, I'm excited. I saw like one thing about the shield, and it wasn't even that negative, So I think you guys have definitely put him on the right track there.
Kind of going back to something you mentioned, it's like, you're saying, oh, they ruined something of mine that I love. We've all been there. Like, as League players, and we all love the all these other IPs out there. We've been there, so we don't want to do that to anyone, right? We're doing our best not to, actually. So we felt that pain before, and it's like that is a very real thing that we fight against every day. We don't want to take away, we want to give.
Right. And sometimes that can be a challenge. Like, if, for example, myself, like I was never a huge Taric fan, right? And so you kind of have to put yourselves in the shoes of someone like you, Dylan, which is like, what do people who love this character actually, what do they like? And like, how can I sort of be in that mindset? Because if you're not in that mindset, then the choices you're making probably are going to be a little bit off base.
And you're going to do a disservice to the champion. Yeah.
No, I'm definitely excited. It's weird. I had a little bit of a moment today, like, oh, am I jaded? because the splash, and then actually seeing the skin splashes as well, I was like, hot damn, those are awesome. And one of them is actually my desktop background right now, and it made me think, like, man, like,
which one is it?
So first today is the regular splash, and I'm doing that for a day, honestly, and then I'm switching to 5th age because it's just too good. Right. It's too perfect.
So we have to take a moment and talk about the splash page iteration and the feedback that we got from our team, because there was that one meeting where I was like, I'm so happy to be on this team. I'm so happy to be working on Taric, and I'm so happy to be working at a company where this is part of the feedback culture. So if you could walk us down that, please.
Basically, what George is referring to is I had a lot of assistance in sort of massaging the different aspects of the way Taric looks in his splash. In order to get him as handsome and as beautiful as he turned out, right?
Okay.
Which is to say, we want it to appeal to everybody, right? We want him to appeal to... He's
omni-beautiful.
Yeah, he's omni-beautiful, exactly. And so I just was having a lot of conversations with coworkers. Specifically, one that stands out to me was sort of feedback I was getting from a couple female coworkers, other artists that I work with.
Okay.
Just about like how low to cut his V-neck.
We must go deeper.
Yeah.
Deeper, Josh.
There was a version where it was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like
You didn't see the top of his abs.
Yeah, it was just like sort of going down to the bottom of his pecs, and he has kind of like this toga thing going on. And at that point, there was like a little too much cloth, and it was kind of like impeding like the shape, like the V shape.
Can't have that.
And somebody said he kind of looks like a nerd in a bathrobe or something like that. And I'm like, holy shit, that is not what we want to do here.
Oh,
that is exactly the opposite
failed.
of Taric. And so, sort of scrambled and tried to, like, how do I fix this? And
I think that's
we
the
pulled-
next skin, right? Taric in a bathrobe.
Yeah.
Done.
Funny you mentioned that, actually, considering what they've been talking about. But
Oh man.
Spoilers.
so we pulled the cloth down a little bit, made it a little bit more sort of casual, and then the important thing, it turns out, was showing kind of the top of his abdomen, right?
Interesting.
That's
That's when
the
people were
sexy.
like, yes.
Yeah.
Now
yeah.
I am excited.
That's a deep V, right? And that was very educational.
That's
for
awesome.
me, and it was a fun time.
That's always such a fun thing here, right? Is that like literally everybody can give feedback,
Yeah.
and it'll end up in there sometimes.
Yeah. And then you look at Fifth Age, and the V just keeps going. You don't know where it ends.
So we've been talking a lot more about his personality, which is so fun because, again, Taric's personality previously, was pretty thin. And one of the cool things here is that, like, yeah, now I feel like when people look at him, they're actually like, that guy actually is beautiful. Before he was about beauty, but man, he was not beautiful. Like, that model was obviously, super aged, and even the splash, like, kind of like weird,
Yeah.
older dude face, Jane Fonda hair and everything, but certainly not the case now. But let's get into that personality more. Like, who is Taric? There's a fun thing here where he's not maybe your stereotypical, badass, but is still kind of badass. I don't know. I don't know, George. You tell me what I'm feeling here. I'm so confused.
Oh, of course. No, this is good. These feelings are
ways than
good.
one.
Everyone should talk about them. This is healthy. So yeah, we wanted to keep the fun of Taric, right? We wanted to keep that aspect of the personality, like, and Decap, I think you brought this up a few times, where it's like he is the guy who walks into a room and owns the room, not because he tries to, but because of his personality. He's just naturally like that. And so that was one of our pillars again when we were walking into the VO, especially, and writing his bio. So we wanted to keep that. And then also we wanted to talk about kind of his focus on beauty, and we started asking the questions, like, what does beauty mean to Taric? What does it mean to an average champion, etc.? And then we dove deeper, and we kind of took reference from the romantic heroes. And when I say romantic heroes, I don't mean like Fabio, although there was some art inspiration for that. But for like Arthur in the Death of Arthur, or like
So you mean like King
Lancelot.
Arthur?
Exactly,
Okay,
like
so like-
Lancelot,
yeah,
and
sure.
and that kind
The
of
tragic romance.
exactly,
the whole,
and the kind of chivalry of like fighting for beauty and truth and love and things that are not necessarily things you can hold with your hand.
Values almost.
Exactly. And then, we also kind of explored the samurai culture of, again, there were kind of similar echoes here. There was like beauty and honor, and not necessarily crown and king. So we wanted to show how someone who had that revelation of like, what, asking the question, what do I fight for? Do I fight for Demacia? Do I fight for a flag? Or do I fight for something that actually needs a defender, like, love, beauty, etc.? So that's kind of like, that's the kind of long-winded way of how we got to what does he want? Why does he fight? And then we built him around this, right? He is a lover of beauty. He is a lover of life. That's, we wanted to kind of emphasize the gameplay kit, like he protects people, he shields them. Why does he do that, So it all kind of came together organically, drawn from those inspirations. And again, to your personality, it's like, someone who loves life, someone who will die protecting life or an ideal, is kind of more of a positive person, more of an open person, and someone who would bring people to them. as he does in game, as well as, through the art. We want to make him appealing, approachable, and, in his VO as well.
So he's specifically become an aspect, I believe, is the story now. Similar to Diana, Leona, Pantheon. One thing that's kind of curious with me there, and is related to what you were just talking about, is kind of the idea of like how much of this personality, this gravitas, and all of that is due to the base Taric, like who he originally was, and then how much is that influence of now him being some semi, call him like demigod being. Like I know with the whole Atreus leading into Pantheon thing, some people were a little frustrated that they thought Atreus was cool and then felt like he evaporated a bit.
Yeah.
It made more sense to me in that case because war is all consuming, and I kind of get that. But in this case, it seems like maybe there's actually a lot more Taric there than in that case. I don't know. Can you elaborate on that at all?
You're absolutely right.
Oh man, that's so good. I'm not a lore nerd or anything.
No.
We have a scale, actually.
Yeah.
No way.
Well,
what was it? 10%.
it was on a whiteboard.
The takeover scale of aspects.
But then we threw it out, right?
Yeah.
We're like, you can't put a scale to Taric, man. What are you?
But we did.
But we did kind of map out like exactly what you're talking about, Dylan, which is like how much does the aspect influence their personalities?
Interesting.
All of these Targonian characters. And Taric definitely fell more on the human side.
Okay.
It was literally like on the right side, it was like this much aspect, and on the left side at the Taric stream, it was like not aspect at all. It was all human, Yeah. And Taric actually kind of fell farther to the left or farther to the human side than most. And I think that actually, it's actually pretty easy for any of us to be like, oh, we had to make him, nice and friendly and charming when he walks in a room or whatever, right? That's pretty easy to say. It also would be really easy to do, but the character exists on live already, and the sort of big, like thing that you have to keep in mind, he's fucking weird, And so we have to have all this stuff in mind, and like we have to do like lover of beauty. Okay, we can do that. Nice guy, we can do that. But this is the part where we have to really respect like how do we take what he has been, and this is again what players are attaching to, and like keep it in the game despite kind of what it is, right? And so when you load into the game with Taric, you will notice like he's not saying the same exact things as before, but he's kind of got the same sort of like attitude about him where he's saying things, and like if you're like standing next to him, you're hearing what he's saying, but you can't really tell if he's talking to you or not, or to himself, or just to the world, or anybody that'll listen, really, because before he would used to be like, Ruby for vigor, right? And it's like, what are you saying, right? And now he'll be like,
what does that even mean, Taric?
Targon is a mountain, and it's like, okay, well, he says like he's just talking about mountains and stars and like love and beauty and whatever, right? And it's not meant to be like, oh man, Taric, look at him, he's so cool, right? It's like you kind of get that weird vibe when you're playing him, where it's like he's saying this weird shit, and you're kind of just like, all right, I don't really know why you're saying that, but your voice is kind of weird and cool, and
that's the thing about the scale though, is like even though he's on the human side, he's
still pretty out there.
Yeah, he's still sort of above, right? Like he is influenced by Targon, and I think the weirdness that you're talking about, David, and the way we kind of embraced it was like his set of priorities in his head, and sort of the thoughts that creep in sometimes are like large scale problems that like most humans would not be able to really comprehend, right? And so he's like, that's kind of in the back of his head when he's having like a normal conversation with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's got that connection to the cosmic now.
Yeah.
Might be like having random conversation with you and then knock you out because you're about to step on a flower or something like that.
Exactly like that.
Okay, gotcha. All right. I mean, that's cool because I think currently you've had that feeling of like, yeah, man, what are you talking about? Actually, like, okay, I get the jokes. Now we've got more of a reason for that, like he is a bit like, up there kind of in like meta power level, and obviously has that kind of mysterious background that like makes, okay, all right, it's okay that I don't understand what exactly this guy's fascination is with that rock. Gotcha. Okay.
And you're kind of happy just to look at him, and we saw that with the splash. When players saw it, right, they're like, they know that Taric's weird, but all they could like actually think about when they saw the splash on the thing was like, damn, that's a good looking guy.
Look at that chin.
Yeah.
somebody linked me, or somebody, of course, the various risky clicks that existed in the Taric subreddit thread recently.
I clicked every single one.
Yeah, I was clicking a lot. I got out unscathed. I don't know. Maybe that's because I was using a particularly risque interpretation of Armor of the Fifth Age Taric as my previous background up until my new one. You guys know the one I'm talking about.
I do.
Everybody does, yeah.
So reading through the thread, I clicked through one that said, it showed a comic. I can't even remember what the IP was, but it was like, it ended up with the punchline, you could cut meat on those apps or something like that.
Yeah. There's been some amazing internet comments so far.
Good
Already,
Great.
yeah.
It's wonderful.
A
It's wonderful.
few hours.
Yeah.
Joyous.
So on the let's get into just why am I playing Taric now? That's what I want to know. And let's start with you, David. Just I'm loading into League of Legends. Like, what am I getting out of Taric? Like, we've obviously been trying to make characters more distinct. That's kind of been an overarching goal. I'm sure played into this. And that distinctness can play out in different ways, whether it's like this guy wins in this way or this guy makes me feel awesome in a particular way. Like, why am I playing Taric and what's the unique awesomeness I'm getting out of it?
Cool. That's pretty open-ended, but so I'll actually tackle it from a couple perspectives. Quick and easy. From like a thematic or a fantasy perspective, if you're into paladins, if you're into tanks and you're playing support, you might pick them up. For more gameplay reasons, if you are playing against a team that has a lot of armor, a lot of AD, Taric is still a little bit better than when he's playing against those types of teams than when he's not, right? You might play Taric when you're playing with a lot of bruisery type diver guys on your team. His abilities tend to synergize really well with people that want to go in hard, right? And that's actually kind of like a weird break he has in his gameplay. You start the game, and because he's probably going to be played support, maybe there's some other roles that he's good at. We'll find out, I'm sure. But because he's going to at least be tried in support, right? You're going to spend probably the early part of the game playing with a marksman, but as you get better at the character and also just over game time, you actually adjust to. Usually, I actually change my Bastion link to more the tanky guys, right? The shield that it gives is based on the maximum health of the person who puts it on. The R has that really long delay in front of it too, right? But if you put on a tanky guy, you can pretty much count on they're not going to die in the 2.5 seconds when it's coming down to burst, right? And Taric's tanky. He has one on him. He puts another one on tanky guy, so Taric can kind of go stand next to kind of the squishy guys and give them the buffs while he already transferred up to the frontline guy, and there's suns shooting everywhere and stuff like that.
Okay, so you're talking, of course, about that using your allies as kind of a temporary point of origin mechanic that we've got built into him now. How did that even come to you in the first place? Was it just?
So we knew that Taric was largely about buffing people, right? And so one of the thoughts that we came to was, how do we make the coolest buff possible, right? Historically, his W has been, I have a lot of armor and I give my allies armor, and then I do this weird thing where I press the button but I lose my armor, and so sometimes I don't want to press my skills and stuff like that. So we just wanted to change that AoE armor buff into, I give my allies armor in a cool way, right? I give out this really cool buff, and the buff that we just sort of came to eventually was all of my spells cast off this person. It's oh, that's really good. I have twice as all my spells are double, right? And that's fun, right? But it also poses a pretty cool gameplay puzzle for the Taric player to solve then, right? Because for those that aren't familiar with the kit changes, historically you would your Q is I click on my ally and I heal them, right? But with the new kit, you can't actually target your spells except from yourself and from your allies. So his Q is now a heal around himself, and if he is linked to someone, a heal around them. If you are not linked to someone that you want to heal, you have to go stand next to them, or you have to put your W on them.
Okay.
You cannot just press your buttons willy-nilly. So and what the right or off your ally, right?
Yeah.
And what this sort of poses is when my W comes off of cooldown, when my Bastion comes off of cooldown, I'm thinking about, where am I going to get the most mileage out of this buff for the next 8 to 14 seconds before the cooldown comes back? And so it poses pretty interesting problem solving sort of
Pretty
situations
meaningful
for
decisions pretty frequently, it seems
right.
like.
Yeah, it's if I put it on Caitlyn and then and Jarvan jumps into a fight, there's nothing I can do to put my R on Jarvan, my E on Jarvan, or my Q on him, right? So I have to be able to live with the decision I've made there for the next 10 seconds. That's not it's 10 seconds. So it's not like always super game like changing every W cast, right? But 10 seconds is a whole length of a team fight. So if you use your W wrong, you can count on getting suboptimal results a lot of the time.
Okay, yeah, that's certainly a fun change, I think, from what we're dealing with, previously, which has been that you've got 2 point blank AOE's that are pretty indiscriminate in that way, and you got 2 abilities that if you can click, they're happening.
Yeah, when I was working on Taric, I would actually make fun of the character. And be like, oh, look, his W and his R are the same spell, right? They just do different things, right? It's like R is circle damage and stats, and then the W is circle damage and different stats, right? And it's like
it's so easy to forget too. And then again, there's that feeling of my teammates don't respect my contribution,
right? And so the funny thing is, I end up he still has 2 circle spells on his kit. One's his Q, and now it's R, right? But the goal there, or the hope, is that they're much more engaging. The R especially, right? The Q is kind of like bread and butter, lets the system kind of do its thing. And the R is very much like the same sort of thinking as the W, which is like, okay, this guy's about auras. Okay, we're going to give him a cool team buff. What is the buff? It's, invulnerability. Okay, how do we make that work? And then so we added the really cool delay to it. Well, cool for gameplay reasons. Probably not cool if you want it right now, but that's like what gives it the interesting moments, right? It's like my buddy's at 30% health, and he's got my W on him. Do I press R? I don't know if he's going to live another 2.5 seconds, right? But if he does, he lives for another 2.5.
Okay.
So there's some really interesting things that can kind of come out of it.
Invulnerability is kind of one of those things that comes up periodically in the same same conversations as, call it, like anti-death passives and things where players are like, another one of these or whatever.
Yep.
I think it speaks to itself, like why it makes sense for him. He is the aspect of the protector at all, and that ultimate protection is, of course, thou shalt not die. Why that in this case?
Sure. So in this case, like I said, we wanted to do really cool team buff, right? And given that I did work on this kit kind of a ways back, we hadn't really made a really strong defensive spell in a while. And it's funny, I was working on the kit, I kind of locked it down, and I was pretty happy with it, right? I came back to it 6 months later when we maybe had a little more resources to actually work on it, right? And I was like, okay, I don't like it anymore, because I for some reason I was just like, I was either pickier or better at my job or worse, or who knows. But anyway, I didn't like the kit as much anymore because it had all these weird problems I saw, right? And time will kind of give you that opportunity to see that. And so one of the changes I made that I think did wonders for the R specifically is originally it was you press the button and there's a 1 second delay, and then it's like 1 second of invulnerability, or 1.5 and 1.5, right? And I just cranked up both ends of like, there's this wait period and then there's this like superpower period, right? And that I think really gives it a different feel than like Kindred ult, right? Because like what Kindred does, or Kindred ult, and there's a good reason to have spells like this in the game, like very life-saving, right? Like Kale ult. It's like I see the Veigar ult coming in the air, I press the button and it saves them, right? But Taric's R is not if the Veigar ult is in the air and I press Taric ult, great, I wasted my ultimate because it's not going to save him. It's going to block nothing, right?
I see what you're getting at.
So the profile of spells and abilities against which Taric ultimate is strong, there's some overlap with these spells with Kindred ult, maybe Kale ult, Fiora's like healing zone and stuff like that. But the actually not Fiora's ult, hers is pretty different. But let's say Bard's W that kind of you just click on him and save him. These sort of spells that which Taric's ult is good against is a lot different than those, just by virtue of the timing element going on there. The wait makes so much of a difference because 2.5 seconds in League of Legends is enough for the entire in some extreme cases, the entire game to be decided.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're getting at with there now. And I suppose it also just fits his theme more of just kind of like, or not his theme, but like Taric was always a kind of an attrition-ish guy. I felt like, those glory days of Taric top that like occasionally worked after like 1 or 2 patches, and then was swiftly
Who knows? We'll
not
see.
so much. Yeah, we'll see in this case. But yeah, like kind of that more attrition thing. So I get that in that case where like he's just going to keep prolonging that fight until all of a sudden, oh wait, we're still all alive and you're all dead. What on that note, obviously support. Are there any other places where we potentially see him?
Smash Gizmo tells me he will be better as a jungler than a support on release. I've tried to like reasonably balance them out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping he's wrong. I'm hoping he's not. Well, that's not necessarily true. I'm hoping it's not really one-sided
Okay.
in favor of jungling. It'd be a pretty big shame if he came out and was unable to support effectively.
Gotcha. Does it not matter that you're giving up the whole like put your effects on your ally functionality for that amount of time?
That's what a lot of people say, right? And that totally makes sense. But if you think about it from the perspective of the jungler, you get to actually engage in the funnest part of the W spell earliest in the game if you're a jungler, because you're running around the map changing who it's on.
Okay.
So I can run into
That's
the
a good
lane
point.
and let's say my top laner that on my team is Renekton, right? I can run into his lane, put the W on him, and then E off of him for the stun, right? And they're not really expecting it because they haven't seen like where Taric necessarily is. So you get to make this really cool like range extension play. Whereas in the bottom lane, you can mostly count on, except when the jungler comes to my lane. If I'm playing support Taric and I'm with Graves or whatever, the W buff is on Graves and it stays on Graves because there's no one else around, right?
Yeah.
And then, but you can do cool plays like Graves dashes and Taric does the stun thing.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the funnest thing is putting it on people and like getting those high moments of like, I think even for like the friendly laners, which is like, oh, he chose me to do this. We're doing something together for the next couple seconds.
Gotcha. Makes a ton of sense.
I
All right,
love the
go ahead, Josh.
teamwork aspect. Of
Yeah,
this whole kit.
it's really fun. I think
Because when you nail that coordination, it's really satisfying.
yeah, we've seen some really cool moments with Taric R and Taric E. You can put it on a Shen that's teleporting somewhere, and the R or the E actually goes with him across the
wow.
map. The same is true of like
That's
Summoner
gross.
Teleport.
Yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be some fun like. There's some fun like let's engage right after or like right as the R is going off at the right amount of time, like out of nowhere, and just
Right.
man, it's gonna
You
be
kind of just
interesting.
put it on your Vi or your Malphite, and they see it falling, but they can
they'll
cover
live.
that distance while the enemy's
Yeah.
trying to run away, and it'll pop right when they get in. And
Yeah. I think that's what I'm seeing here. I feel like in general, one of our thoughts is to kind of condense power where it's a little too diffused and create more of those highs and lows and all that type of
Moments,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, the moments. Yeah, and that definitely, I can definitely see how that's coming through in this case. So super excited. Well, all right. Well, we're gonna wrap up. I have one last kind of question I love to ask on this type of stuff. Is just what are you guys most looking forward to? Whether the reaction to X Splash or just that feeling of that ability going off or how players are going to like interpret him in the game or stuff like that. What are you guys looking forward to the most?
I think much like building him, I think it's a lot of different aspects. So in general, I want to see how the diehards like yourself react to him. I want to hopefully make them happy as well as open Taric up to a new audience. So that would be my hope.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see the new audience and sort of like the group of people that embrace him now as opposed to before where they just like didn't really care about him.
That is so fun. There are champions that we've all loved and had their moment, and they just never see play. Just they just desperately in need of some work or whatever. They just don't fit, and then like when an update really hits it, and they're just everywhere. It's just like hopefully not too powerful or anything like that, but it's just so fun to see them. I think you guys are really right. It's cool. Like there are so many. Like we've all been here a long time, but there are so many people who have maybe played League in the last year and literally haven't ever seen Taric. And they're like, who's this new champion? So I got you. What about you, Decap?
yeah, I mean, I think obviously I'm so glad the wait I think is over. Right, it's been so long that the players have wanted this and that we've wanted to do this.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly relieving to like have it finally coming out, and this is like probably one of the most exciting like work days I've had in a while, just because it's finally happening. You see that meme on like Reddit or anywhere else, like it's happening, right?
Yep.
It's like literally every time someone brings up Taric, I'm just like, yep, can't talk to you about it. This sucks. Sorry, player, but
Now's
they're
our
like,
time.
hey, what's up with Taric? I'm like, can't tell you. And so I'm glad that is like over and then we can talk about it finally. And I'm also, like, as with any project, really excited to just see where we hit and where we miss, right? Because we work really hard on like trying to put these pieces together, and we have some misses on like every project, right? And we're gonna find out what those are. But it's always exciting on the big ones like these because we've like put a lot, you know, of effort into it. But even more so, like if you look at the time between, you know, the last big update, which was I think Poppy, and this one, we can learn a lot. So we get the opportunity to show players like, hey, we didn't fuck that one up this time. Like we got these things right, and we delivered you this player you really wanted, right? And that's just the reception like moments are like really big on the various parts.
Yeah, and a cool thing you mentioned is that this is a great thing about League is that you know, even if there's some things that need to be tweaked, we're patching again 2 weeks after he comes out, and we can keep like the job doesn't stop. Like it's about getting him back to a good spot that we can potentially keep iterating on. So so yeah, that's super exciting. Taric rejoining the game. Yeah, well, I mean now that he's out of the way though, what's gonna be the but when are you updating X rallying cry? Urgot?
Let's see, Yorick. It's what?
Yorick.
Warwick.
Yeah. Yorick's the
I think
one who I was
the
thinking.
people that, or the character that's most talked about after Taric is probably Urgot, right?
Yep.
Just in terms of like, you know, the weight.
I happen to know who's working on him.
Yeah.
Oh, on that note, folks. All right, we're gonna wrap this up. Want to thank all three of you for coming out, putting up with my terrible introduction,
Thanks for having
mishmashing.
us.
Yeah, absolutely,
great.
I'll go
mishmashing
from there.
names, titles, everything. But yeah, great having you folks out here. I can't wait to see what happens further down the line with Taric, and want to thank all you folks out there listening to us. As always, League Community Livestream. Make sure to follow us, like us, subscribe, tell us what we're doing wrong, tell us what's good, what you want to see more of, all that type of stuff, so we can keep getting better. Other than that, we will see you folks next week. Take care and enjoy Taric.